Today's discussion is about African Peaceful Boundary Delimitation and Demarcation Roadmap, 2025 to 2050. Period. Strategic Phase Priority Sectors/Areas Implementation Strategy. Expected results by Phase 2025-2030. Phase 1 Foundation, Prevention and Priority Mapping. Areas 1 Legal Delimitation, Conflict-Sensitive Borders, GI/GNSS Mapping, Boundary Archives, National Boundary Institutions, Community Consultation. Strategy 1 Establish/strengthen national boundary commissions, identify high-risk and unresolved borders, digitize treaties and maps, create joint technical committees, establish early warning and dialogue mechanisms, train African surveyors, lawyers, and mediators. Expected results 1 Reliable baseline data, stronger institutions, priority borders identified, improved early warning, increased technical capacity. 2030-2035 Phase 2 Accelerated Delimitation and Demarcation. Areas 2 Boundary Surveying, Legal Agreements, Boundary Pillars, Joint Verification, Border Community Peacebuilding. Strategy 2 Negotiate outstanding boundary sections, conduct joint surveys, install and verify boundary markers, establish shared digital databases, institutionalize community consultation and local dispute resolution mechanisms. Expected results 2 More legally settled and physically demarcated borders, fewer local and interstate boundary disputes. 2035-2040 Phase 3 Integrated Border Governance. Areas 3 Border Security, Cross-Border Trade, Pastoral Mobility, Shared Resources, Border Infrastructure. Strategy 3 Link demarcation with joint border management, develop legal crossing points and border markets, establish agreements on water, grazing, forests and fisheries, coordinate security and civilian authorities. Expected results 3 Safer and more stable borderlands, improved mobility and trade, reduced resource-related conflict. 2040-2045 Phase 4 African Border Cooperation and Regional Integration. Areas 4 Regional Corridors, Infrastructure, Economic Zones, Environmental Management, Digital Border Systems. Strategy 4 Harmonize O and REC border policies, connect neighboring border communities and economic corridors, expand interoperable digital boundary systems, strengthen regional mediation and joint monitoring. Expected results 4 Borders increasingly function as bridges for integration, trade, and cooperation rather than conflict zones. 2045-2050 Phase 5 Intergenerational Peace and Civilization. Areas 5 Long-term peace, institutional continuity, education, culture, sustainable development, and knowledge preservation. Strategy 5 Establish permanent boundary maintenance funds, preserve treaties, maps, and historical records, integrate border peace into education, strengthen intergenerational institutions, conduct periodic continental boundary reviews. Expected results 5 Durable peace, security, stability, regional integration, and peaceful civilization across generations. Priority sectors/areas. Priority sector main focus strategic importance Sector 1-1. Boundary law and diplomacy focus 1 Treaties, negotiation, mediation, arbitration, and international/African law. Importance 1 Provides legal certainty and peaceful dispute settlement. Sector 2-2. Surveying and geospatial technology focus 2 GIs, GNSS/GPS, satellite imagery, digital mapping and remote sensing. Importance 2 ensures accurate and transparent demarcation. Sector 3-3. Boundary infrastructure focus 3 Boundary pillars, reference points, access roads, and maintenance facilities. Importance 3 makes agreed boundaries visible and sustainable. Sector 4-4. Joint border institutions focus 4 Boundary commissions, technical committees and joint inspections. Importance 4 creates permanent mechanisms for cooperation. Sector 5-5. Peace and security focus 5 Early warning, incident prevention, information sharing, and coordinated security. Importance 5 prevents border disputes from becoming armed conflicts. Sector 6-6. Border communities focus 6 Pastoralists, farmers, traders, traditional leaders, women, and youth. Importance 6 builds local ownership and social cohesion. Sector 7-7. Cross-border trade and mobility focus 7 Border markets, legal crossings, trade corridors, and pastoral mobility. Importance 7 creates economic incentives for peace. Sector 8-8. Shared natural resources focus 8 Water, grazing, forests, fisheries and wildlife. Importance 8 prevents resource competition and promotes cooperation. Sector 9-9. Environment and climate resilience focus 9 Desertification, drought, floods and ecosystem protection. Importance 9 reduces climate-driven border tensions. Sector 10-10. Infrastructure and connectivity focus 10 Roads, railways, bridges, energy, and communications. Importance 10 turns borderlands into development corridors. Sector 11-11. Education and knowledge focus 11 Training, research, archives, and professional development. Importance 11 preserves institutional memory and builds African expertise. Sector 12-12. Regional and continental integration focus 12 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 Regional and continental integration focus REC and bilateral cooperation. Importance 12 connects peaceful borders with African integration. Sector 1313. Digital border governance. Focus 13 common databases, secure archives, and real-time monitoring. Importance 13 improves transparency, evidence and institutional continuity. Sector 1414. Finance and investment. Focus 14 boundary funds, development finance, and public-private partnerships. Importance 14 makes long-term demarcation and maintenance sustainable. Implementation strategy. Strategic pillar 2025 to 2035. Political commitment 2035 to 2050. First decade secure national and bilateral commitment to peaceful settlement. Second decade institutionalize peaceful boundary policy across political generations. Legal framework. First decade review and conclude outstanding boundary agreements. Second decade maintain and periodically update legal frameworks. Technical capacity. First decade train surveyors, cartographers, GIS specialists, lawyers, and mediators. Second decade establish African centers of excellence and advanced research networks. Technology. First decade digitize maps and deploy GIS/GNSS/satellite technology. Second decade establish interoperable continental digital boundary infrastructure. Demarcation. First decade prioritize disputed and high-risk sections. Second decade community participation complete. Inspect and continuously maintain demarcated boundaries. First decade establish consultation and local peace mechanisms. Second decade make community governance a permanent component of border management. Security. First decade develop early warning and joint incident response mechanisms. Second decade integrate cooperative border security with human security. Economic development. First decade develop border markets and legal crossing systems. Second decade establish cross-border economic corridors and integrated development zones. Resource management. First decade negotiate shared water, grazing and ecosystem arrangements. Second decade establish permanent transboundary resource institutions. Regional integration. First decade coordinate national programs through ONRECS. Second decade develop continent-wide standards and integrated border governance. Monitoring and evaluation. First decade establish baseline indicators and annual reporting. Second decade conduct 5-year strategic reviews toward the 2050 vision. Financing. First decade create national and regional boundary demarcation funds. Second decade establish sustainable continental financing and maintenance mechanisms. 2050 strategic vision. Peaceful negotiation downward arrow. Legal delimitation downward arrow. Accurate technical demarcation downward arrow. Permanent joint institutions downward arrow. Community participation downward arrow. Cooperative security downward arrow. Cross-border development downward arrow. Regional integration downward arrow. Peace plus security plus stability plus prosperity downward arrow. Long-term African civilization. Core principle. The objective is not simply to put boundary pillars on the ground. The objective is to transform Africa's borders into permanent foundations for peaceful coexistence, human security, economic cooperation, regional integration, and intergenerational civilization. Ultimate 2050 result from boundary uncertainty. Rightward arrow. Peaceful demarcation. Rightward arrow. Cooperative governance. Rightward arrow. Secure borderlands. Rightward arrow. Regional integration. Rightward arrow. Sustainable peace and long-term African civilization. Thank you. See you soon.